Hello and welcome back to Interjections. It's coming home edition. I'm your host, Andrew. I've got Miko, Irfan, and Jay with me. Irfan, what's happening?
Championship Sunday. Looking forward to two good matches today. And I'm sure the teams that I want them to win will not win. So I'm just getting mentally prepared for that. How are you guys doing?
Hanging in there. It's going to be a tough day for us to all process, but it's trying to, recover from the events of yesterday as well. Jay, I know you're going to be waking up at 4 a.m. to watch England bring it home, surely.
Probably not, to be honest. I still haven't even bothered to watch the England-Netherlands highlights from earlier on in the week, so I'll go to bed hoping that Spain pull it out of the bag and wake up regretfully, as I do each day, and hope against hope that England have not brought it home.
I feel like you just lied to us because I've definitely seen you make hot takes about De Vrij post Watkins goal.
You know, who needs that negativity, really? I mean, no, I'm kidding. I'll get to that later. I've got a good one in store.
I'm sure you do. Miko, how's it going?
Yeah, thanks. Going fine. Enjoying vacation still and watching these Euros and Copa. So yeah, let's go.
Do they work in Finland? I feel like you're always on vacation.
Yeah, sometimes, occasionally.
A socialist paradise.
This is why Ziliakis has so much time to talk about Inter. He doesn't actually work.
That's right. He tweets all day.
So it's a bit of a lighter week from an Inter news perspective. So I want to be topical. We have our finger on the pulse of what's going on in football worldwide. So I want to start by talking about England. And if you've listened to this podcast for any period of time, you know that we have 4 people on this podcast who are actively rooting for England to lose today. And I've seen some complaining online from England fans. I mean, that's nothing new, but specifically about why everyone wants them to lose to Spain. And I want to just have a roundtable discussion about why we individually do not like the English national team. I was thinking about this week, and it's kind of an interesting paradox. Like the national team itself, I find the players are pretty likable. Harry Kane seems like a good guy. When circa 2018, 2019, when Kane versus Icardi discussions were being held, I was always Team Kane. And, I was rooting for him to win a trophy with Bayern in some capacity, because he honestly seems a good guy. Bellingham is one of those rare prospects who actually lives up to the hype. My point is, the players on the English national team are somewhat, if not completely, likable. But I still absolutely hate this national team, and I want them to lose without a shadow of a doubt. And for me, what this boils down to, I find, is Premier League fans. And maybe it's wrong to put Premier League fans and England fans in the same category, but there's a lot of crossover. They tend to be of the same ilk. What really set me off this week was there was an article published on The Athletic when Inzaghi renewed. And the first comment from some guy with an overly British name was, Inzaghi needs to test his mettle in the Premier League, as if that's the next step up in Inzaghi's career. And for me, it's really tied to the Premier League. There's this sort of myth around it where it's the best league in the world. But when you look at Champions Leagues won or just European competitions won in recent years, it's not. It's sure, the league has the most money, but as a result, their fans, who are English as a result, think their teams and players are more dominant than they actually are. And that leads to these individual England players in the squad being considered more dominant than they actually are. Because what you have is a nice collection of players, but it's honestly insulting to look at this English team and compare it to the likes of France on an individual talent basis. So most of my animosity towards the English national team comes from their fans, and then just a sliver of it, a big sliver of it, comes from the media. If you watch American or even Canadian broadcasts of these like European Championship games, it's just so tiring how every player has to be tied back to the Premier League. If you're watching an Italy game, the only player the announcers can talk about with any like non-cliche analysis is Jorginho, because they watch him play with Arsenal and Chelsea. So I'll end my complaining there. Irfan, why do you hate the English national team?
Yeah, I think that's very well said, actually. Because I was thinking about this as well. You're right. The individual players are not necessarily the problem. Like I feel the same way about Harry Kane. Bellingham, I actually really like, and I do think he's as good and deserves as much praise as he gets. But there's always certain players on the national team, and this goes back maybe for the last at least 20 years, where they get disproportionate amounts of hype in the media and among fans. And then I hear people say things like, "Oh, well, the English team is the best because they have, Declan Rice, and they have Luke Shaw, and they have Phil Foden." And I'm just like thinking to myself, I'm like, guys, do you know there's a world outside of, you know, the Premier League, and not even outside of the Premier League, but outside of like the first, 4 or 5 teams that everyone's heard of in the Premier League. So because of that, and because of how insufferable I think the overrating can be among the fans and among the media, it does create this exhaustive like narrative that you just want to strike against because it's very irritating and always in your face. For American fans, it's kind of similar to the way you have, Dallas Cowboys or New York Yankees fans, where every time a tournament or every time something happens, their fans and the media think that they're entitled to the championship, and this has got to be the time that they win it. And if they don't win it, then something, unbelievable is happening. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I also don't like them. With that said, I do feel that there's individual players that always have irritated me on the national team. To be honest with you, going back to maybe like 2006, I actually really liked the English national team, like especially when it came to players like Lampard and Gerrard and some of those guys. I thought they were really good, and even Beckham I always liked. So there's always been players that I like, but it's this constant overrating of individuals and the team, and the sense of entitlement that of course they'll win and it's coming home, like this sort of stuff. Just like, it's really frustrating for, I think, people who are neutral fans. And you touched on this for a second, Andrew, but also being in the US, and especially being in the US recently also, it seems like anyone who's like a European soccer fan is a EPL fan, and usually like a Manchester City fan or something like that. And like no world in football, soccer exists outside of Manchester City. And so if you talk about great players, or you're talking about Holland, you're talking about Foden, you're talking about, Rodri, and nothing else exists outside of these players. And it's like there's no sense of like history or awareness of like what's going on in the rest of the leagues. And again, you can think that the EPL is the best league, you can think that Manchester City is the best team in that league, but to claim that no one else is really worth a damn, I think is just incredibly frustrating. It's just it's like the nouveau riche of soccer fandom in the US. And it's incredibly frustrating because they flood everything with those same narratives.
You use the word entitlement, which is a very good one. I do enjoy the suffering overall of the fans. Just, they haven't won a meaningful trophy since 1966. There's sort of a Toronto Maple Leafs to it, of just enjoying them being stuck in this rut and hoping they never get out of it. So there's a bit of that component. Miko, what do you think?
Yeah, why do I hate England? Hate is a strong word. I'm gonna be more diplomatic and say I dislike them, and I think this goes back like over 20 years or something, when I started like following football more detailed, and with internet, and there was this Finnish internet forum, and it started from there, where the Finnish football scene it was about English football quite a lot, and maybe not so much these days, but still it's pretty strong, the people liking especially England and English football. So I've been always like against it. I've been with Italy, so it's been the counter reaction to that common common thing of liking England. So it's basically that for me. It's a counter reaction of this everyone. Well, not everyone, but most of the people in Finland liking England, and I'm not gonna say I dislike all their players or the coach or anything, but in this tournament, I haven't liked them playing football. Like I've said in the previous episodes, it's been absolutely boring and almost unwatchable, the game they've been playing. And I would say only in this Netherlands match they played somewhat okay football in the first half, and then it went back to the old parking the bus style of game. And yeah, for me it's kind of mix of this so-called practical way of not liking practicality of not liking them because they play how they play, and then this history and the counter reaction are in the Finland. So I would say that's it for me.
I know we as a league, get looked down a lot upon by English fans, and that's because players like Mkhitaryan, Darmian, Alexis, they come here in their mid-30s, late 30s, and they reinvent their careers. So it creates this farmers league stereotype where these guys couldn't cut it in the Prem. They come to Italy and now they're quote-unquote best elite players, our best players, and it just goes to show the Premier League quality. That's always been something that bothers me, just because it's just difference in style of play. If you watch the Premier League, it's just nonstop running. It's a young man's game. The Italian style of game has proven that it sustains, older players because it's more stagnant. There's not nearly as much running and pressing. And I don't know, something else that bothers me is when there are plenty of examples of players who have flopped in Italy and then gone on to the Premier League and suddenly become incredible players. And it's not because I don't boil it down to individual talent as much as style of play. Bruno Fernandes, Mo Salah, I think, are two good examples of players who were not nearly as good in Italy as they were in the Premier League. Jay, what do you think?
I agree with all the above. I certainly think a lot of this is just exacerbated by 3 out of 4 of us live in English-speaking countries, and obviously a high rate of Finnish people speak English as well. So Miko's not completely immune from that either, but living in Australia/America, former English colonies, obviously strong kind of cultural links and all that. And like I said, English-speaking nations, it's only natural that the people there are going to be drawn to a culture of football similar to theirs, right? And so naturally, we're bombarded with English football media, and throw in the whole kind of social media cheapening of a lot of discourse that goes around. The users tend to be quite young as well. So you've got a combination of just annoying kind of, unfortunately, just seems to be the way most things are headed these days. Any discussion about anything really, football, politics, movies, whatever it is, the discussion is all just kind of very banterish and people just talking shit nonstop. And I think it rubs off badly on the product of which they're speaking, which is the Premier League. And so I don't blame the Premier League entirely, but, I definitely agree that it's very insufferable to just constantly hear Stephen McShithead had a strong season playing for Wolverhampton, and now all of a sudden Man United are interested in buying him for 55 million or some nonsense like this. And you're like, fuck me. It just feels really tasteless, I remember when some ginger shithead, I think his name was Longstaff. I think there are 2 Longstaff brothers who play in Newcastle. I think there's Matty Longstaff and Sean Longstaff. And in Australia, we often call them rangers, short for orangutans. And one of these soulless freaks scored a goal against banter-era Man United. And the very next day, I'm hearing, worth 45 million pounds minimum and this kind of stuff. And you're just like, fuck, come on, mate, seriously. So it's always funny to see those memes where you've got a photo of Darmian, to use your example. It says Matteo Darmian with the Italian flag, value 2 million, and then the Brazilian flag, Darminho, 20 million, and then the English flag, Matthew Damien, 90 million. You know what I mean? So it's just an insufferable, intolerable trait of a number of kind of blended together circumstances. Sorry, and the end result is that people who are inherently against it are just going to find it overwhelming and annoying. So I guess being as charitable as I can, in some instances I can't blame them, but I guess that kind of behavior begets more of that behavior, and you end up with a general cesspool of discussion around the Premier League. So I wish them every I'm not a better man to rise above all that. So I wish them every misfortune at every possible opportunity, starting with tonight. For those listening, I'll just say that at the time of recording, we are what time's the game? Like 6 hours from now?
7 hours, I think.
Yeah,
or
7
hours from now. So chances are by the time this episode goes out, England will have already been victorious. But I wish them all the misfortune in the world.
That's exactly right, Jay. It's one of those things where you're right. You can't look at this without looking at, I guess, the macro social media issues of our time, because it is incredibly. It's like everything that's ever been discussed has been discovered in like the last 5 years. So even like, again, I was picking on Manchester City fans. They do have a great team, and a lot of them are probably real fans, have been fans for decades. But there's also those fans who probably have no idea that Mancini used to coach them, and that they won the Premier League on the last day with a Aguero goal, and there was some really cool Pellegrini sides, or that Dzeko played for them. Like there's so many fans who have discovered Manchester City and discovered the EPL and like what seems like it's been like the last 5 years, and that doesn't stop them from continuing to want to learn about the game. It seems like it just results in them pontificating on their superiority more and more and more. And it is kind of the social media version of basically everything now. So I'm not surprised. You're right that you have to kind of view it within that lens. The other thing I'll add is there's also been a lot of discussions about how the English play so well and they have so much individual talent, and kind of like we were discussing with the French national team this tournament, they've played horrible. They've been bad consistently, game over game. And again, same thing this year as in other years. Sometimes they seem to have like a very easy path. Like we joke about this when it comes to like the Champions League. We'll say something like, "Oh, Manchester United, Manchester City, they'll be in like the easiest group of all time, always, without a doubt, in the Champions League." And it seems like England benefits from that also. They have not really played or beaten anyone until they beat the Netherlands this last time around. And even when they win, it's always unconvincing, and it's usually marked with some sort of controversy. Like, I don't want to talk about the penalty, the Dumfries penalty, but like it's always something, right? And the last Euro Cup, I remember being absolutely incensed, infuriated by the way the English were playing, because you would have someone like Sterling, and you knew exactly what he was going to do. He was trying to dribble in the box, get the attention of a defender, and then kind of like cross over him with the ball and then fall down, flop, get a penalty. And they consistently get these calls, and it's incredibly frustrating for anyone who I think is a neutral fan as well. The flopping, the constant like crying and stuff gets really, really irritating. And again, Serie is known for these theatrics. Italy is well known for flopping and diving as well. I get that. But it's a lot easier to stomach that when you're already a team that no one really cares about, versus sitting there and extolling some team and then watching them on the pitch and they're doing things like Sterling was doing and things like that. It's incredibly frustrating. And then again, the lack of awareness of history and culture also frustrates me. For a lot of these fans, Saka is like the greatest Arsenal player of all time, and you're like, your team had like Thierry Henry and Bergkamp and all these other players. And again, I'm reflecting, growing up with this team, growing up with this league, growing up with this game in like the last maybe 20, 25 years. But obviously there's people who are looking at me and saying, oh, well, there are people at Arsenal 50 years ago and you're part of the same problem. So I get that, but it's so loud. I think that's that's why it's unavoidable.
So we just spent 15 minutes talking about our hatred for England, and I have to admit that going into tonight's game, I was actually conflicted for a while because I hate Spain so much that I contemplated for a minute if I'd rather England win. And my result is I'm hoping for a 0-0 draw that goes to penalties. Italy has built up a bit of a rivalry with Spain in recent years. I was telling you guys offline, Italy and Spain have met in the knockout rounds of every European Championship since 2004 until this year. Thank you for that contribution, Italy. So there's a lot of bad blood. It's been pretty evenly split in terms of outcomes, but I'm so sick of Spain and their quote-unquote beautiful football and the sense of entitlement that comes with them thinking they deserve trophies just because of the style of play that they have. So it was honestly, as much as we talk about England, it was actually a tough one for me heading into tonight. I'm also really tired of hearing about the 16-year-old child and pictures Messi took with him 10 years ago. But it's all right. I suppose I just spend too much time on the internet.
You know what? I previously referred to Lamine Yamal as Yassine Lamal. I was getting confused with Yassine Adli, the new Zidane. I've got too much Milan on the brain.
Of course. Of course
Always
you
true.
do. I will say I agree with you, Andrew. This was tough for me. I'm not a Spain fan, and I also despise it when people say they play beautiful, they play the way it's supposed to be played. Thinking back to that kind of mid-2010s team that won seemingly everything. But I will say that it just doesn't, again, it's one of those things where the narrative doesn't match the reality. Like the World Cup they ended up winning in 2010, I think it was, right? They won every single knockout match and the final 1-0. And it was like 70% possession of just, passing to the closest guy next to you and just exhausting the game. And everyone was incredibly impressed because they could pass around in like triangles and this whole tiki-taka stuff. But every match was boring. It was like watching paint dry. They won every match 1-0, usually because they would bore the opponent to death, and then Iniesta would launch some very nice diagonal through ball into the strikers and they would score. That's pretty much how they won almost every match, and or like through some header off a set piece with Puyol. And it was unbelievably frustrating that people were holding them up as some paragon of beautiful, tactical, talented football, because again, it just didn't match the reality. It'd be nice to just have narratives that match what you're actually watching on the pitch.
Well, I think those are all the grievances I had to air today. So I guess I'll kick it back to Irfan now to grieve about the Argentina National Team.
Yeah, so I previewed this last week's episode, and without a doubt, Argentina went forward and did exactly what I expected them to do, which is start Julian Alvarez again in the semifinal match. And props to him for scoring. And again, I'll preface this with I don't dislike Julian Alvarez. I think he's a great player. He seems like a really nice person. He's obviously talented, scrappy, and plays for a great team. But my issue with Argentina is they have consistently, in my opinion, put down Inter players or just completely ignored Inter players. As much as I have a checkered history with Icardi, there were a lot of times where they simply did not call him up when he was playing really well or start him. And they don't ride the hot hand. They go with players that are popular. I think they go with players who are popular to Messi way too much. They kind of play Messi and his boys rather than actually putting together the best team and putting the best team that can be out there on the pitch. They don't do that. And harkening back to 2006 when they inexplicably left Zanetti off the national team and failed miserably in the World Cup because of it. And then in 2010, after Inter had won the treble, they didn't select Cambiaso or Zanetti. And in no world can I figure out why that would have been the case. Like Mascherano was good, but he was not yet in his prime the way that Cambiaso was. And they had nobody else at right back. And what ended up happening in that World Cup, they struggled for a bit, and then Germany slapped them 4-0 because they played a young Otamendi at right back because they had no other right back. And they got wrecked on that side by Podolski and by Miller. And everyone remembers it. It was so obvious that all the attacks for Germany came up that same side, and they had no way of stopping that entire team. And they missed Cambiaso and they missed Zanetti immensely. And since then, I can't help but think that Lautaro is the one who keeps getting the short end of the stick with these guys because they have the smallest like amount of patience ever. Like strikers will go out and fail for 2 or 3 matches because they're not in form, or they're just temperamental. Strikers tend to run a hot hand a lot of times, but the leash that they have on Lautaro is like the shortest leash ever. And it's incredibly frustrating to watch because right now, I mean, we joke about it like with penalties and things like that, but right now, Lautaro is a top 5 striker in the world. I can't imagine a lot of national teams that wouldn't start Lautaro. And the fact that they completely refuse to do that or pretend that it's an actual debate is frustrating. And so again, Argentina, I feel like when you look at them on the world stage, when you look at them across a lot of different leagues, they have some of the best like players. The talent pool is about as good as it gets, but they consistently, manager after manager, whether it's Peckerman, whether it's Scaloni, whether it's Maradona, they always seem to, I think, underrate a lot of Serie players, and they always seem to underrate a lot of Inter players, and it's very frustrating. There was another time, I think it was a 2014 World Cup, where it was like a situation where they very obviously needed a goal, and they did not. They had like Dybala sitting on the bench. They had somebody else sitting on the bench from Serie A, and they refused to put those players in because they would rather either play somebody from the EPL or put in somebody from like the Argentina league that no one's really heard of. And it was that whole thing with Maradona also, where he had a dream of taking Palermo's taking Martin Palermo or something, and he was going to win a trophy, and he picked them on the team. And they do stuff like this all the time, where they'll play some player that everyone knows is not good enough over like a more established player, usually somebody from Serie A or from Inter. And it's maddening to me to see it happen consistently, time after time after time.
Disagree a little bit on the Lautaro front. I think, Lautaro, prior to it's already been 2 years, prior to the 2022 World Cup, he was actually kind of Argentina's bona fide starter and undisputed starter for quite a while, right? And I remember having this sense of how strange, how interesting that despite arguably better players in terms of like legacy, at least, such as Higuain, and this is, again, we're talking about Lautaro 2 years ago as opposed to the Lautaro today, but, players like, even 3+ years ago, considering the qualification period to the World Cup, right? But players like Higuain, Tevez, Aguero, I don't think it's controversial to say that those guys could be considered better players than what Lautaro was in 2021 or 2020, right? And yet these guys were just unable to find the net consistently for Argentina. They all had kind of underwhelming goal records, and yet he was Lautaro quickly establishing himself as Argentina's preferred number 9. And I remember just thinking how kind of interesting that was at the time, and I kind of boiled it down to, it's probably certainly a case of Messi and the boys, but if that's what it is, then that's what it is. And Lautaro was maybe the best at playing with Messi as opposed to the other guys, and maybe that's why, or that explains some of his success in the national team. I think what happened since then is obviously Lautaro just having a historic bad tournament in some ways, where he got unlucky scoring 2 very nice goals, which were both disallowed for marginal offsides. But from there, obviously he lost his spot to Julian Alvarez, and that coincided with Alvarez kind of coming to the fore as a legitimate player in his own right, and obviously playing a big part for Man City, and going on to play a big part for Man City as well. And then you're stuck in a position where you've got a player who's seemingly going through a bit of a crisis, and then a player who's kind of nipping at his heels and arguably warranting a bit more starting time. So the decision, what's happened between now and then, I do see where you're coming from, and I do agree actually to an extent, but I'll give a bit more points to the idea that it's not 100% undeserved in Lautaro's case, but as historically anti-Lautaro as I've been at times, I do think I'm not overly biased in this particular assessment. But with regards to, some of the previous things you mentioned, going back to like disputes with Sorin, I always thought Sorin was a flog, pretty useless player. I remember there was some kind of like internal squad kind of disputes with Veron, I think, and I don't know, there's always been just some bullshit going on with the national team. The fact that they had Maradona manage the team itself was a joke. So yeah, when you think about 2010, 2006, and yeah, it's inexcusable. The fact that you didn't take Ken Biaso, the fact that you didn't take Zanetti again, 2 World Cups in a row, nothing short of a disgrace. I think Zanetti's always had this kind of this misfortune in that, as far as the national team goes, people kind of think he's too old, and that because of his age, it's time to kind of bring in some fresh blood, right? Little did they know that Zanetti would go on to play for another 8 years after the 2006 World Cup. And so had they known that, maybe they would have picked him, but I certainly think he was the victim of some bad timing and some poor treatment by the AFA. And yeah, what can I say? I have no love lost for Argentina. Having said that, I wouldn't mind Lautaro winning another trophy. So I think it's only good for his confidence to do so as the captain of Inter. So I will kind of loosely support Argentina against Colombia. And I'm sorry to all our Colombian fans, but I don't know. I kind of don't give a fuck about Colombia. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll talk about potentially one of their players joining us, but I think one of the other things that frustrate me about this Argentina team. Yeah. No. Oh God.
Run it back.
Yes.
Run it back.
To replace Buchanan?
Bring him back. No, I think you're right, Jay. The other thing that I think frustrates me about this team is that, and this is true, I've talked to many people who watch this national team, and whenever Messi is playing, it used to be that they would integrate him into the team would play well together, and he would just, do what he usually does for Barcelona. But it's really become everybody stand around and watch Messi, and how can we accommodate Messi? Like, it's become that over the last maybe 6 or 8 years, including the World Cup win, where everything just has to kind of work out and flow through Messi. The team plays in a lot of ways. The results, I know, have not been great, but the team plays in a lot of ways better when Messi's not on the pitch, because he, especially nowadays, is basically a statue who chooses to engage when he feels like it, and still can do something brilliant, like especially setting up players.
You're going to turn me into a Penaldo hater, you're going to turn me into one of those kids who posts Penaldo on every Instagram comment. I don't know. I don't think you can say the results haven't gone their way. They are the reigning world champions. They won the last Coppa Italia, if I'm not mistaken, and
America.
Because Coppa Italia. They won the last Coppa America, and they won that stupid tournament between the Euro winners, Italy. The Euro winners that thing. And the Copa America winners. They beat Italy as well. So I don't know. I do think right now, I mean, what they've managed to do, what Scaloni's managed to do, is kind of bring a more kind of, dare I say, European, a kind of more European conventionality to Argentina. I feel like historically, at least historically in my era, I don't know about stuff that happened in the 70s.
Yeah, Miko will
I've read plenty of it. And I've watched highlights, but I'm not lived through. It's not the same as living through football when you're alive at the time and watching games live. But so I can't really speak of what happened to prior to the like 80s, early 80s and 70s and 60s. But I feel like at least in my lifetime, the problem with South American teams has always been like, you know, very attack focused, a lot of flair players, maybe some good individual defenders or midfielders here and there, but maybe tactically not as disciplined or astute. Whereas, like I said, Scaloni, I feel, has been able to bring in some of that European conventionality to the point where they kind of, to me, Argentina, of all the teams I've seen, most resemble a club team in that they look really kind of comfortable playing and like they've been playing together for a long time. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Messi fan for what it's worth, but like, I guess if it works, it works. You know what I mean? So I can't really criticize them too much on that front. That randomly brought me to quickly, just Dunga of all people. I felt like, and this was like what, 10 years ago, but yeah, I actually felt Dunga got a really short end of the stick. I thought he did something similar with Brazil, where he also introduced a kind of more defensive solidity, kind of European, like I said, conventionality, just like kind of more less insanity, less craziness, and more just reliability and sturdiness to the national team. And they fucking ran him out after one disappointing tournament. So, but anyway,
no, I was gonna say, the Messi thing. I was saying only because if you look at, and you mentioned this, Jay, like if you look at the statistics of like proven goal scorers like Aguero, like Higuain, their record for Argentina is not that great. And when you have a team that has always had talent and you have a playmaker / forward like Messi, you would expect someone like Tevez or Higuain or Aguero to do really well for the national team. And you look at their goal scoring records, and Aguero's at like a ratio of like 0.41. Higuain's at 0.41 as well. Lautaro actually beats them both.
Higuain had a billion chances to score goals. We all remember the 2014 final.
Yeah. But my point is, I think there's something about Messi that makes all of these forwards underperform. And maybe it's just his aura of being around and they feel like they need to defer to him. Or maybe they just choke because of the pressure of playing with him and wanting to deliver for him. But it's a proven fact, if you look at this Argentina team, that the strikers suffer when he's on the pitch. And with Lautaro, I see it all the time. When Messi chooses to engage and when he chooses to actually interplay with Lautaro, they're honestly unstoppable. But there's so many times where he just will not pass him the ball, or so many times where he's standing around. And he's been doing that for the last 6 years. And I know they won the World Cup. We can talk a lot about how that World Cup was won. I don't want to get into it. But it's one of those things where it's affecting, I think, the forward play. And it goes back to even Aguero and Tevez and Higuain. And the last thing I'll just say about Zanetti is two things. I looked this up kind of extensively because it kept bothering me. And apparently there's two things that are at issue with Zanetti. One is that historically he's been considered, for some reason, and I forgot the term in Spanish, the term in Argentina, but he's been considered bad luck among the national team for some reason. And I don't know exactly why, but he's been considered bad luck. And Maradona, especially, who was very coked out and also very superstitious, apparently, was very nervous about taking Zanetti because he thought he was like a bad luck omen or something like that. So that narrative's been around. It's not just Maradona that's been around with Zanetti. The other thing with Zanetti is that I can't help but believe, honestly, and this is moving a little bit into conspiracy land, but I feel like he's always generated some jealousy among the players, because if you look at Argentina's national team caps, Zanetti was far and away the leading capped player for the national team for a long time, for a long time. And he was the captain of Argentina for a while.
No cap.
Exactly. And so he was sitting there like the leader in caps, and you had a bunch of these other players coming around. And I feel like his respect and his admiration among Argentina has always been a cause of jealousy. And if you look at it now, he's still the third most capped player in all of Argentina's history. Only Mascherano, who has 2 more caps than him, and Messi, who has way more. have more caps than him. And so Zanetti, for all practical purposes, was before Messi one of the preeminent like legends of Argentinian soccer, outside, after, of course, the Maradona. So it's one of those things where I feel like he creates this decisiveness, because I feel like people are a little bit kind of jealous of his presence.
Zanetti's never been as appreciated as he should have been outside of Italy. I feel that's sadly also true in his homeland. And I 100% agree that there's some politics behind the decision to basically retire him from the squad. And I've definitely heard. I remember reading a lot of rumors at the time about some personality mismatches in the locker room and stuff. And like I said, for whatever reason, people preferred to go with Sorin, that curly head bitch. Unfortunately, Zanetti got shafted out of, by all rights, that dude should have something like 160 Argentina caps, but I think he had to retire on like 130 or something. So unfortunate, but it's not the first, nor will he be the last player to get shafted out of national team duties by locker room cliques and things like this.
It was just looking at the stats or the records. Zanetti missed both those World Cups in 2006 and 2010, but he played most of the qualification games, so it wasn't like the coach decided to drop the guy from the squad altogether. He was just dropped from the actual tournament, which is kind of a disgrace to me that he was missing in both World Cups, but he was part of the squad throughout the like the road to the World Cup. So I think that's just incredible, given what kind of player he was and what kind of like a leader and a personality he was. So, but as you guys mentioned a bit, there must be some politics or some kind of this kind of arguments between maybe some players or something in the locker room going on, because it just doesn't make any sense to me why he was dropped like that all of a sudden in both cases.
Can you guys name the 3 Inter players who were part of the 2014 Argentina National Team that lost in the final to Germany?
Palacio, Ricky Alvarez, and was it Milito?
Not Milito, but you got the other 2.
I definitely know it was Alvarez and Palacio, but let me think. Don't tell me it was Campagnara, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, fuck. A bunch of fucking losers.
I just cannot believe Ricky Alvarez was on that team.
I know, I can't believe that. Palacio was in the final. He played in the final. He came on as a sub,
Palacio came on.
Yeah.
He missed the big chance. He tried to chip the keeper, and
all right.
One other quick interesting thing about that about that 4-0 Germany beatdown when Zanetti and Cambiaso weren't selected. One other quick interesting thing about that year was that Walter Samuel was playing, and he was a center back, but he was injured, and so he didn't play that match. And I feel like if he would have played that match, I don't think Germany would have gotten 4 goals through. And the other thing that was interesting was that they had selected Milito, who was, again, obviously in torrid form, coming off of a treble, and they barely played him as well. And again, I wasn't as upset about that because they had talented strikers at the time who were also in form. But I'll just say it just goes back to this idea that they just always disrespect my boys from Inter.
Look, I just want to say, you mentioned that you're veering into conspiracy theory territory. I think we should stay there more often, or I think we should visit more often. I think it's a great place to come up with some discussion. My favorite, you know what? I'll skip that one. It's a bit too shady, sir.
How are you going to tease us like that, though? Come on.
It's a bit too sketch. Maybe I'll get to it next time.
All right, let's talk about the Inter news from the week, and then we'll wrap up. So just a couple things happened this week. One is, it sounds like the possibility of an Hermoso signing is dead and gone. There were reports that he lowered his salary demands specifically for Inter, but whether it is because of Oak Tree or just we don't rate the player, we've moved on. He's not the targets. Instead, we're targeting this young Colombian. He's a pure left back, it appears, from Verona, Cabal. I honestly can't put together 2 sentences about him without lying through my teeth. So I will let Miko talk about him in a minute. And then, of course, the other news from the week is Taremi and Zelensky, both officially announced, both officially Inter players. So Miko, I'll hand this over to you to give us your scouting report on this Colombian wonderkin.
Yeah, I got like either saying that I would have specifically saw him play probably when he played against Inter. Maybe I haven't even checked that, but that one I checked is that he played some matches for Verona like two years ago as a center back, and then last season he played as a left back as a starter. So I think that's kind of a profile we should be looking for this Bastoni rotation player.
What's with why are we going after a left-footed centre back anyway? We've got Bastoni, we've got Acerbi, we've got even Augusto in an emergency.
Well, I would guess we want to add another one. Just like we need right-footed players for the right side, so we need left-footed players for the left side. I think that's I don't know. Why not? I think we need more of those players. Bastoni plays like 60 minutes and then he's out, so we need to bring in some other guy there. So I guess that's the reason, because we need to add one left-sided player anyway. I would assume so. Why not?
I don't know. I don't know what our strategy is with defense recruitment. Cabal and Hermoso, these guys are both flank CBs, so they'll play on like either side of the on the left side of the middle centre back. And we touched up on this last week about the whole De Vrij and Acerbi thing, and this is prior to De Vrij unfortunately getting gimped by Ollie Watkins. But it was a true Giroud moment, wasn't it? But a little bit confused as to why we're not linked to more central centre backs and why we seem to be only interested in flank centre backs.
So you mean that? Well, I think we're gonna bang on Acerbi and De Vrij, because do you want to see Acerbi on the left side anymore? I wouldn't.
It's not so much about do I want to see Acerbi on the left. It's so much as do you not want to see someone come in the centre? I mean, I don't think Pavard is right for that role. I don't think he's like kind of strong enough in the air. Bisek could be, but I don't think he's good enough at tackling or man marking just yet. Bastoni could play the role, but he's probably a bit wasted there. And we've got like a kind of 36-year-old and a 32-year-old kind of taking turns in that role. I just feel like I'd prefer a more bona fide, guaranteed, nailed-on starter for that position. But I get the financial situation, but yeah, I don't know. I just feel like that position is more critical than, like Bastoni's backup.
Yeah, here's my complaint. If you look at the squad, left wing back is probably covered. You have Augusto and DeMarco. Bastoni, Miko made a comment, Bastoni only plays 60, 65 minutes. But why is my question. Inzaghi consistently subs this guy off, and I don't see his effectiveness waning. He doesn't look tired to me, but we always take this guy off, and I always assumed it was like a defensive, just trying to strengthen things up defensively. But we could probably play him more if we wanted to. But when I look at go ahead,
I think it's not. I don't think it's like that. I think he is simply tired, and Inzaghi doesn't want to use him like anymore when he is tired, because we need kind of those runs he is making, and his style of play is like he runs a lot up and down the pitch. So I don't think he's that effective anymore if he plays when he's tired. That's my theory why he's being taken out so often.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. I see your point. It feels like there are ways you could manage that situation. You could tell him to not roam forward as much, play as a more traditional defender. Like when you kick Acerbi out left, that Cherby's not roaming up the left flank. You know what I mean? Like, there are ways to have the player stay home, expend less energy. But really, there are two positions that I think are higher priority than a reserve left center back. A reserve left center back is nice, but it's a luxury. But we still don't have a proper right wing back replacement, and we aren't linked to any. Even if you renew Dumfries, we do not want to see Darmian as a right wing back reserve. And then Jay, you touched on
he's
it.
The guy. But he's the guy.
Why is he the guy? Like, he's not good in the position anymore.
Well, I think Inzaghi sees him like fit enough there. I can't see any more because we haven't been linked to any right flank players, so that's the way it is. At least for me, it looks like that.
I agree that's the conclusion reached. I just don't agree with the conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
And then, Jay, you talked about it, center back. And I view both of those positions as a bigger concern. And as much as I don't rate Buchanan as a player, at least when he was healthy, you had someone who could conceivably play minutes as an attacking player at right wing back. Now you don't have one. And once again, your solution is to go out and find someone who's going to sit at third in the pecking order behind DeMarco and Augusto, unless this guy is going to just play as a poor-ish defensively left center back. I'm a little confused by what the plan is here. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It doesn't sound like we'd even be in the market for a player like this if Buchanan didn't get hurt. Really, at the end of the day, Hermoso would have been great because at least you know what you're getting in terms of quality. Now we're taking a punt on a guy we know nothing about and hoping for the best.
I think that the kind of two separate conversations in that Cabal is, well, obviously different positions, but as far as like the whole right wing back situation goes, I don't like the kind of lack of options we have. Let me kind of ask you guys an open question here. If you need a goal, are you bringing on Dumfries or are you bringing on Darmian?
Dumfries.
Despite Darmian having a decent kind of like track record of scoring some pretty clutch goals, I think we all agree Dumfries is probably the better attacking player. Buchanan's injury is more worrisome than I initially thought because despite him being a retard, we still had Cuadrado last season, who is, like, if you're looking for a goal, you're probably going to put in Cuadrado as opposed to Darmian, right? Now without Buchanan, we're kind of bereft of an attacking option to bring off the bench. And I think that's a bigger concern than we're really seeing realized in the media. We're not linked to any attacking options as a right wing back. And I'm just dreading this thought of being down 1-0 or, drawing a game 1-1 and then having to bring on Darmian to try and salvage a goal down the right flank or, God forbid, the left. So the more time goes on, I'm starting to kind of give a bit more respect to Buchanan's injury. Not so much the player himself, but at least, look, he is fast. He did score a goal after all, playing as a left fullback and kind of cutting in. And obviously, right wing back is his natural position. So again, despite the quality issues, his mold is one of a fast attacking player. To each their own, everyone will kind of view things differently. The way I view things is that, I guess, players have a kind of mold or description or utility that they kind of fit. And then once you kind of categorize them into that utility, it's just a matter of quality. So I categorize Buchanan as a fairly attacking player. Again, I don't think he's a particularly high quality attacking player, but at least he's an attacking player. You know what I'm saying? And I am concerned that we've essentially lost the utility attacking wing player for both left and right wings.
I'm gonna quickly touch on this central defense position. I think that we would go for a new guy if we sold De Vrij, but it doesn't seem that he's going anywhere. So we've decided that Acerbi, he's the central guy, so he's not gonna be on the left side. And like we discussed many times, Inzaghi has these positions for each player, apart from maybe a few who can play in multiple positions. But like last season, we didn't have this so-called backup for Bastoni. Okay, Augusto was there, but Augusto was also DiMarco's backup. So kind of try to do this now in a way that we really have 2 players for each position, like 2 individual players. And as for the central position, I think next summer is the place when we gonna do some moves regarding that. I think the players will cost a bit more than what we have at the moment to be able to like get a player we want to have there.
I'm just curious, are you guys getting concerned about Oak Tree at all? I am a little bit, just in that once again, the whole hope was that they were just going to let Murata do his thing. And it sounds like they have, I don't know how much you can believe these media reports, but it sounds like they're interfering in transfer dealings a lot more than you'd expect. And that's, okay, they said no to Hermoso because of his age profile. There was another name we were linked to this week who's escaping me, who they reportedly also rejected as not an option they wanted to consider. I'm just surprised.
Rodriguez?
What was that, Miko?
Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you. I guess I'm just surprised. Like, Oak Tree are not football scouts, and they're essentially trying to pigeonhole us into signing these Bisek type players. And that is, you're going to sign a player who is relatively unknown for 5 to 10 million and hope they develop into a player who can contribute to our squad will also generate resale value. And that's a dangerous proposition. That's what we did for almost 3 or 5 years during the banter era, where you were signing players like Dodo, you were signing players like Alvaro Pereira to low cost deals and trying to get them to become meaningful players for your squad. When in actuality, if you're trying to
interjections, that was a poor example because Pereira cost like for 20 million or something.
It was expensive as fuck.
But yeah,
did we actually? I do not remember him costing that much.
Yeah.
Dodo was a good example.
Dodo was a good example.
Yeah,
Dodo cost 9 million. I remember that one.
Pereira not so much. That was an unmitigated disaster.
I do not remember him costing that much money. But anyway, my point is, when you look at models like Dortmund or Milan or whatever, they're actually dropping 20 to 30 million on players with the hope of reselling them. They're buying their own Alvaro Pereiras and trying to get these talents and convert them into future capital gains. If our strategy is to hope management can identify 5 Biseks, we're in big trouble, because that's just not going to happen. You cannot accomplish that. I don't care how good of a scout you are.
Exactly. And even if we sell Bisek now, how much would we sell him for? Like 15 million? You know what I mean?
30 million.
But I will say, look, as long as it's not coupled with sales of established players, if you want to round out the squad and find backups that are of that ilk, then I'm less concerned. But I agree with you. Like, if this is going to be the operating model going on, and we're going to start replacing established veteran players who might retire or who might be past their prime with gambles like this, it's definitely a concern. Because some of the players we've been linked with recently, I've literally never heard of. And, I feel like we're pretty well informed on this podcast generally. And so it's a bit shocking that some of these names are just crawling out of the woodwork, and you're like, wait, what? Why are we linked with this guy? Especially when it's not part of like an overall kind of cohesive strategy.
Anyone miss Steven right about now?
I mean, if Zhang was here, we'd be talking about selling at a minimum Dumfries, possibly Thuram. So it's pick your poison.
Yeah, I think it's so far Oak Tree is good enough. They haven't, like you referenced, they haven't forced any sales. They've covered the loss which was left from Chang. I believe it's gonna be like 45 million loss for this or the past season. So it's okay for now, but let's see how the market will develop from here. I think I wouldn't believe everything the media or the narratives media is going to like feed us with the Oak Tree is going to decide this and that. So I'm not totally sure that's the case. It could be, but I can see that they have decided together in the board with Marotta that okay, we need to make this squad younger, so we're gonna sign these younger players. But yeah, I see the same concern Andrew mentioned that if we go with that route, it can backfire us because we need more depth, and I don't know if this is the depth we we wanna have when we try to defend the title this season and go further in the Champions League and that
We
kind
need
of stuff.
quality. We need quality, and we need difference makers. And either you buy that kind of player, in terms of like again going back to what I was saying about player profiles, you go and buy players who have those inherent skill sets, speed, technicality, that kind of ability to create a moment of magic, or you buy established quality, and we're kind of doing neither. Like Taremi is not really that. Zielinski, I think, has a bit of that, but I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Not entirely sure that it's enough. Like I said, I'm concerned that next season we're going into the next season with more or less the identical starting 11, and I don't think that should ever happen. I don't think you should ever be playing the same starting 11 as you did the season before. Just as a principle, you should always be building on it and improving on replacing players with better players in this constant evolution. To kind of give you like a shitty video game example, let's just say you've got a squad full of 85 kind of players and you got one guy who's like 83. Yeah, it's not significant, but maybe replace him with like an 85 player, bring him up to the quality of everyone else, and then just kind of keep building from there. Right now we're just kind of adding more. Like we've got all these, again, if you imagine these like FIFA cards that are so popular these days, all these players rated like in the high 70s. We're just buying more players in the high 70s rather than buying someone who's a level up who really improves us. Because again, if you consider where the squad was last season, maybe we can defend the league despite the fact that other teams are spending more, given that there was a big gap, of course. But continentally speaking, I don't really fancy our chances that much more than I did last season, based purely on the kind of players that we're signing right now. I don't look at Zielinski and Taremi and Cabal and go, oh yeah, now we're definitely going to the to the quarters or to the semifinals of the Champions League. It's just not enough in terms of like difference makers and pure quality.
Especially when you've got a team full of World Cup flops like Thuram and Copa flops like Lautaro, just overinflated wages and players past their prime. Dumfries giving up key penalties to the English.
De Vrij getting gooned by Ollie Watkins.
Yeah,
Hazard can't even play 1 minute.
I know, Jay. I thought you were definitely going to go there, Jay. And I thought when we were talking about Argentina, Jay, I thought you were going to be like, well, Lautaro, he's not even the second best Martinez on his own team. You got Emi Martinez and Lisandro Martinez, who are better than Lautaro. So come on, I'm trying to let you cook here. You're not cooking.
You're in my kitchen. Get out of my kitchen.
There is something to be said though about the lack of impact players off the bench, and we've talked about this. If you need to change a match,
and we're getting rid of Carboni, who's maybe the only, again, maybe in terms of levels, he's not that great because he's not proven yet. But in terms of the profile or build of player that he is the closest thing we have to that, like an attacking mid/wing/ second striker type player. Sorry, Andrew.
I'm lighting a candle for Cassidy as we speak. Go on, Andrew.
Interesting you bring him up, Irfan. I've read a lot of bad reports about him coming out of England where he's just not up for it and Chelsea are ready to unload him. But
because he's not English.
Fair. We still haven't fixed the biggest problem from last year. And when you look at why we went out against Atletico, it was because we were bringing in someone like Arnautovic off the bench to try and contribute meaningfully. And the squad is still rough around the edges. And I'm just worried that with all these increased matches we're going to be playing next year, we don't have the horses to keep up. We don't have the firepower needed. And maybe you get fortunate with a Champions League draw where you get someone desirable in the round of 16 and a Portuguese club in the quarterfinal. But does anyone here think that if we draw a PSG, a Madrid, Atletico again in the quarterfinals in the round of 16, we're getting through? It's hard to look at our squad compared to the truly elite European squads like Roma and say that we can advance. That is just a subtle joke because Roma is somehow the 5th ranked club in Europe right now.
But those are the coefficients, so they've done well enough.
I'm just teasing, Miko.
But all I'm gonna say is we got rid of Klaassen, and his FIFA rating is 76, and we got Zielinski, and his FIFA rating is 82.
Yes, so, this is how you analyze football.
How you gonna counter that, Jay?
You fucking got me there. I'll tell you that. That's game, set, match. That's checkpoint right there.
What is Taremi relative to Alexis?
I know when I beat Alexis is 76. Taremi's a 79. Taremi's a 79 gold card.
Sanchez is 80, and what was? I think Taremi was 81. So there you go.
All right, you know what? We are Champions League boys.
We are cooking.
I know when I'm beat.
But I'm not as worried. I understand, Jay, your point about improving the starting 11, but I think improving the bench like we do especially with Zielinski, but I would also say with Taremi, I'm not as worried, but I want to see more, and I'm not sure if we're gonna see more of that. But let's see. I'm not as concerned as I expected. But yeah, go on with if you want to talk more about Carboni.
Well, it sounds like we're trying to move him on to Marseille, and I keep hearing reports that Marseille are quite interested and that the deal is becoming more advanced, but none of these fuckers have listed a figure. So I have no idea what the deal is reportedly going to be. I've seen fans throw out numbers like 20 million or 40 million, but realistically, like, what can we expect for a guy who's played like half a season at Serie A level at Monza?
Would we be retaining a buyback option or anything if we sold him to Marseille, or is this an outright sale?
Well, I heard yesterday that it was a loan to Marseille, so even that's kind of just adding more confusion. Being the pessimist I am, I can't let Irfan, one-up me, so I'm just going to say, don't at me when we sell Carboni for 11 plus 5 million bonuses linked to Marseille qualifying for the Champions League, which they failed to do, plus no buyback option.
I think that the case with Carboni seems to be that we want to outright sell him with a buyback, but Marseille only wants to loan. Or that's the idea I got from the recent reports. And I assume part of the reason is we demand like 40 million, and no one's gonna pay 40 million for Carboni. That's like pretty certain. But I think we would accept like 30 plus bonuses. I would see that happening. But I think we wanna add the buyback anyway, which won't be used because do we have like later in the years, do we have like 40, 50 millions to?
Yeah. We add a $50 million buyback that we can't afford to redeem after he has a world-class year.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm kind of on the fence with this one because by selling Carboni, we would be able to improve our current squad. That's like a.
But would we? I'm
pretty sure we
would we actually reinvest the funds?
I'm sure we would like reinvest at least part of the funds, and we would get someone to improve at least the bench. And I think that's if we can spend like 50, even 20 million to this squad, that's gonna improve the squad anyway. That's like a certainty that we will improve the squad while keeping Carboni. That's kind of some kind of a risk in a sense that we will monetize. If we sell him, that's like we monetize the big value and the potential what's there. But if we keep him, we are risking that we will not get, like in a money wise, we won't get the best return out of him if he doesn't reach up his potential or even half of that. So I kind of see us pondering, or the management pondering what they're gonna do. But of course, they can't sell him. They can't sell him if there's no offers or proper offers. So. And
did you guys see that timeline someone put together where they showed like last season? It was like July 12th. Carboni has a great skill set and he can offer something to our team. July 15th, Carboni is loaned to Monza.
Yeah, that was hilarious, and it's kind of a good proof that we shouldn't take anything what our guys are saying about, like, for example, Carboni and his future. It doesn't mean much what they say today, because tomorrow something can happen and then he's just gone. But yeah, the comments Inzaghi made about Carboni was quite interesting. To me, it sounded like he isn't even seeing Carboni as like the second striker in our 3-5-2 system. And he talked about that Carboni can be used behind the striker with like another player, like in a 3-4-2-1 system, and then even as a right flank player, like in an offensive option on the right flank where he can cripple past his defenders. And that was an interesting to me, because that kind of I think that leads to a question that if we don't see him to be a support, not a super striker, but the second striker, what kind of a role can he ever have in our squad in the future? Of course, maybe Inzaghi can change his system a bit, or it can fluctuate throughout the season. But that was anyway interesting to hear that Inzaghi said something like that. So that's why I'm really a little concerned that if we just want to get rid of him and try to monetize him.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we just don't rate him, or that we don't feel like we have space for him, or don't want to make space for him, because the reports seem to kind of unanimously consider Carboni to be a really, really strong talent. Like, he's always popping up in these like top 20 young prospects lists, and I know 90% of those players turn to shit anyway, but
he's in the Argentina national team right now.
Exactly, there you go. He's in the national team. I've just heard a lot of excitement about the player in general, and for whatever reason, we, the team who should be kind of utilizing this coveted young prospect, just seem intent to flog him off for a nominal fee. So I think that's a bit concerning, a little bit disappointing, but whatever, I'm used to it at this point, I guess.
The reality is we integrate our own youth players at such a low clip at this club. You're almost always better selling them off, taking the gains, and investing into the first team. DeMarco's the only first team player we've integrated from our academies in the last 15 years. So I'm honestly team sell. And if we can get a buyback with Marseille, that's optimal. He'll be there with a proven manager, a manager we know can cut it in Seriea. It makes you think that if he performs well at Marseille, he might be a good fit here. If he doesn't perform well at Marseille, he's Joaquim Correa 2.0. So an outright sale with a buyback is best case scenario. I'd be open to a loan. It doesn't sound like we need capital gains this year. It doesn't sound like... I'm less optimistic than Miko that Okru would reinvest funds. So if a dry loan to Marseille seems like a pretty good option in the scheme of things, we can see how well he does there. The problem is, like, will they actually play him, right? If there's a dry loan, there's no incentive. If there's a buyback option, at least Marseille have some incentive to give the guy playing time.
Yeah, I probably agree with you there. I think it's, I don't know, Carboni seems cool and all, but I'm very skeptical that we're going to use him. I don't think that he's gonna be used by us, and so you might as well let him venture out, see if you can make some money, and see if he really blossoms. I think we talked about this a little bit, but Jay's kind of ideal version of some tricky African winger that we can bring off the bench would still be a nice pickup if we can get it, because I do worry going into this team.
There's like
I'm
billions
actually
of them in France.
I know I'm more optimistic about Taremi and Zielinski than I know a lot of Inter fans are. I think that they're really solid signings, and I think they'll do well for us. I just don't think that we have a spark plug off the bench, though. I mean, Fratesi maybe can find. I mean, he finds himself in good positions. He scores some really late important goals for us. But if we're ever in a situation where we're down a goal, there's just not enough firepower, in my opinion, off the bench that can create like an opportunity against like a low block, or that can create something when people are parking the bus. And so we talk about the actual needs that we have with Buchanan being injured, with the central back position, etc. But I still think we need some sort of like a spark plug off the bench. And I don't think that's even really in the realm of conversation right now, which is a little bit disappointing.
All right, let's wrap this up with some Jay's hot betting tips. Jay, give me your predictions for the duo of finals we have today.
Like I said, regrettably, by the time this is out, the finals will be pretty much done. So we can look back on these wise predictions with a sense of regret. I'm going to say England win 2-1 against Spain. And I'm going to say Argentina terrorize their way to another final 1-0 with a goal from Julian Alvarez.
With a Lautaro
of course.
88th minute substitution to just run around for a little bit.
I was thinking more like Lautaro starts the game, misses a penalty, and then Julian Alvarez comes on to save face with a late goal.
Come on. We all know Lautaro is probably 11th out of 11 options for a penalty for the Argentina National Team. They'd let Martinez take one before, the keeper take one before him.
I think they'll start Alvarez, unfortunately. But I just see Argentina's having too much for Colombia. So I expect a 1-0, but I don't think it'll be like that entertaining a game. I think it'll be pretty tense, and ultimately Argentina will just win. So yeah, those are my predictions. Argentina, England, and then when they do the Euros versus Copaamerica winner again, maybe they can do a Falklands War Part 2.
That is a great reference to end on. Well, we managed to talk about nothing for an hour and a half. Hope you all enjoyed listening. We'll be back next week, and hopefully Inter does something to Mercato between now and then. Catch you then.
See you guys.
Catch you later.